point to this. So yeah, I guess we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and be using Replit for this workshop, just because it's something that I know everyone has access to. And if you want to use like your own, favorite text editor or something, then feel free to do that as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. And if anyone doesn't have a Replit account, then please, make one now. So the point of this workshop is to be largely an introduction / like brush up to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for two reasons. One is just, it's a very helpful language or helpful set of languages to know. It's, web development is obviously very huge in the modern day and age, both, for getting a job yourself and for teaching the students, since it is definitely something that's really popular for kids to go into, especially right after Scratch. Python is one great option, but some kids like the more visual side of it, and websites provide that. So that's one reason for this, and the other is because we have that full stack workshop coming up this first one this weekend, and then we have another doing the front end this weekend and then back end next weekend. And that, will be beginner friendly, but we do want, you are going to have some, kind of knowledge of JavaScript, HTML, if you want to follow along optimally. So that's part of what this is for. If you, are coming into, if you want to do that workshop and you have no experience with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, then, that's part of what this workshop is for as well. But if you do know HTML, CSS, JavaScript already, then I hope that this at least, provides a fresh perspective on it, and gives you some more ideas of how to teach it and how to utilize it on your own. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just open up a new REPL. This one I'm just going to be kind of messing around in, not really building up a full project yet. So I'm just going to call this workshop 1022 and create the REPL. So to start out, so who here has already, and see who's here too. So hey CO, oh, she is not going to draw you yet. Get tricked by that every time. Hey CO. So I just created a new REPL with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So if you could go ahead and sign into REPL and start one yourself, that would be great. Thanks. But yeah, so who here has coded, a medium, who here knows HTML, CSS, JavaScript so far? A little bit.
I know JavaScript quite a bit, but HTML and CSS not so much.
Gotcha. Cool. Great. So start out, let's go ahead and talk about, HTML to start. So HTML is basically the structure of the web page. It's the building blocks for the web page. And it's very much just like, what you see is what you get, at least to start. There's none of the sequencing and logic that is present in Python and JavaScript and all these other coding languages that y'all might be used to. It's just, it's laid out and it's here. So what I mean by that is you'll see that, it gave us some boilerplate code right when I opened up REPL. And when I hit run, you can see the output is just hello world. And all this gives us a hello world, but there's a lot going on here that we don't need to go over in detail, but you can see that it follows this kind of tree structure where everything is inside the HTML. And then inside the HTML, there's two big tags, the head and the body, and then everything else exists inside of that. And that's kind of the structure that HTML is commonly going to have, is just tags inside of tags inside of tags, very, a lot of nested tags as these things get sectioned off. And that's why it's helpful to have this indentation here. It doesn't actually need it like something like Python does. I can, do some crazy, I can even have them on the same line here, and it still works. It's just much harder to read if I mess around with that. So, whoops, I don't know what happened there. Cool. So this first part is the head, and this part isn't really too important when you're talking with students or really dealing with it on your own right now. It just contains information that the browser needs in order to load the page. So you can kind of see like, okay, this is the character set it's using. This is, what is the width of the website relative to the actual device. And then here, this one's kind of neat. This repl.it, this title here, if I go and I actually open a new tab to look at my website, it just says hello world, and up here it says repl.it. So I can change this. I can say my site. And now if I go back here, I think I may need to run to apply the changes. I don't think so, but let's do it to be safe. And then it says my site. So this is what it actually uses to populate the tab that you see at the top of the browser. But then most of the code you're going to be messing with, at least in the HTML side of it, is going to be here in the body. So this hello world here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And I'm going to start using only HTML tags for this. So don't worry about memorizing all the different tags. It's not really important. You can just Google HTML tags, and then, a bunch of great resources come up. Oftentimes the first one here is W3 Schools, and that's the one that I personally tend to go towards. The Mozilla website. Yeah, this one is the second one. This is also a pretty good one, but my go-to is usually W3 Schools. And you can see here, it just lists out all of the tags that are available in HTML. And so you can, just refer to them, and you can even Google a specific thing. Like if I wanted to, for example, add an image, I can say HTML image, and then it'll just, be the image tag. And again, since there's not usually a ton of problem solving that goes into this, it's just like plug and go. It's not really too important to try to memorize the individual tags, just kind of the structure of an HTML document and how to utilize them. So with that in mind, I have memorized some just from repetitive use. That's another reason why you shouldn't worry about memorizing, because you will anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and create an H1 here. And this is going to signify, I'll just build up the whole thing. I'll say my website. And then I need to add a /H1 inside these carets here. So this is the start of the tag, this is the end of the tag, and then what's in between is the inner HTML. And how different tags react to their inner HTML depends on the tag, but for the majority of them that use it, it's just going to be the text that shows up. So this H1 is going to give me some big, bold text of whatever I put in here. And then there's other H tags. There's H1 down to H6. And I always forget whether, I think it stands for heading. It's either heading or header, and I always get it wrong, but it's something with an H. And so if I put like an H3, I can add like a subtitle. And you'll see that it's going to be a little smaller, but still, kind of big and bold. And if I want to make something that's more than normal text size, I can go ahead and add a p tag for paragraph. So I have a nice little, much smaller paragraph here. Anyone have any questions about this so far? Okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and add in another couple tags. I'm gonna start with the image tag. So the image tag is a little bit different. All it's gonna do is it's just gonna be the tag itself. It's not gonna have some inner HTML inside of it. And then, but we need to give it some sort of source, right? We need to give it somewhere to pull the image from. So that goes into the tag itself. You'll notice that I'm inside the actual arrow here, and I'm going to change one of the attributes within the tag to give it a link. So I'm going to say source equals, and then I'm just going to go ahead and find a link for it. I'll go to Google Images, look up cat. I like this one. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to make sure I hit copy image link. I don't want to copy the link itself because I want the link to the actual image. If you're working with kids, it's often easiest to also just say open image in a new tab, so you're guaranteed to hit the right one, because then you can just get it from the top, copy, and then go back into REPL and then paste. Oops, REPL doesn't let you paste with that. You got to use the hotkeys. And make sure you put quotes around the whole thing. So now if I run this, I have my image here, but it's pretty big, right? Like when I open the page in this little window, I can't even see really that it's there. I just see very tip of an ear. So I can change more attributes. And this is true of all these tags. They all have attributes that you can mess with, and then they just fill in certain defaults if you don't put it. So I'm going to go ahead and say width equals 500 here, and I'm going to put that in quotes as well. One thing to keep in mind, so yeah, I put it in quotes because that works better. That's, that's a little better. I'm going to make it even smaller. I'm going to make it like 100. So I could take these quotes out, and I have a feeling it'll still work. But yeah, something to keep in mind with HTML is unlike something like Python or JavaScript, it's not going to give you any errors. It's just going to try its best to work with what you have, which sounds great, code that doesn't crash. But it can be a problem because later down the line, you may have issues affecting, tags that you put later down, and you don't really know why because it was working before. And then on top of that, each browser is going to react to your code a little differently. So just because it works on your browser doesn't mean it works on all browsers. So you want to get into the habit of coding things in as close to the rules as possible. Just because it works doesn't mean you shouldn't change it. So in this case, you want to put all of your attributes in quotes because ultimately it's going to get converted to some other sort of code. And you want to make sure it's in the right formatting. Strings will always work out the way you want them to, whereas it may not work out that way if you don't put the quotes in. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about this? So one more tag I'm going to add before I move on is the link tag. A for link, A for, I believe, anchor, and I don't really know why they called it that. I mean, I guess it's because link was already taken. But this is like the what's the word, hyperlink. So I can say A and then click here to go to Google. Say Google. And so if I run this, it comes up as just basic text because I need to actually give it a link. But how can I fit in the link if it's already, the inner HTML is already taken by what they actually see? Well, here I can just go ahead and put in an href. I can say href equals. So again, don't worry about memorizing this, especially when I was learning, images being source for their link and links being href. It's confusing, but you can always just look it up. Don't worry about it too much. And so now I can just go ahead and I like to copy it from the top to make sure I get it exactly how it should be. Oh my gosh, what? It just goes away. Whatever. I can just type it in. HTTP. All right. So if I run this now and click here, it actually doesn't work because REPL is a little weird that way. If I go and I look at it in the actual site, it's cool with me going to Google, but it doesn't let me do it inside the REPL window itself. I believe it's been a while since I've done this. I believe the kind of hacky fix to that is say target equals _ blank. Am I remembering that right? And that should open a new window. Yeah, and then it's allowed to do it in a new window. But that's just a REPL specific thing. Cool. Anyone have any questions about that? Great. So one thing to keep in mind is that, again, elements can be nested. So this link, for example, I don't necessarily have to just put text in here. I can actually put the link around my image. So if I take my image here and put this in, now the image is the inner HTML of the link, and I'm just adding the formatting to make it make a little more sense. So if I run it, you can see it's still, the image still exists. It didn't like take this literal text and put it into the center there. And if I hover over it, there's an indicator that I can click on it, and sure enough, it is the link. So you can include that. You can have elements be a part of other elements. Like for example, here, clicking on this image still takes me to the link. So that's enough of just raw HTML here. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and it is the style of the site. It's how you make the site look more than just this basic, bland HTML. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the CSS because, once again, that's something you can just look up. I find that CSS specifically is easy to learn through practice. When a student or when yourself are like, how would I, do this thing? How would I, move this image to the center or something like that? You can just Google it, and then you find it, you retain it, and you do that again next time. But to start out, I'm just going to talk about kind of how CSS works. So what you do is you type out the thing you want to change. So in here, I want to mess with the body tag. So I want everything inside the body tag to be affected by this style here. So I say body, and then I'm going to add a curly bracket and press enter. So I can go ahead and just mess with different values inside the body tag. So first I'm going to go ahead and say background, and then I'm going to make it blue, and then see what happens here. And I do need to put a semicolon here. Once again, CSS will not give you errors, but it is still picky. And if you don't put a semicolon, it will get mad. So now it's got a blue background. But it's kind of hard to see my text against that. So I can go ahead in here and I can change text color, or is it actually just color white or something like that. So now I have white text on a blue background. But maybe I decide that I don't want my title to be white. I want it to be a little flashier. I want it to be gold. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, the H1s are going to be gold. And I run it. And now the H1 is gold. Everything else is white. And then the background itself is blue. So this is an important thing to notice in CSS is it's going to go for the more specific thing. So my index.html, you can see that everything here is inside the body. And I said that everything inside the body has to be white. But my H1 was told to be gold. And so even though those conflict, it still goes with gold because that's more specific, right? Even though it is in the body, it's an H1, so it's pretty clear that that's what I want, right? And if I did, for example, let's say I have two paragraphs here. And I want to make this is a spooky paragraph. I want this one to be Halloween themed. I run it and it's still here, just in the regular color. So if I want to make this like have, like black text on an orange background, I want it to apply. I want it to apply to this paragraph, but not to this paragraph. So I can just go ahead and go into style.css. Well, actually, first things first, I'm going to go ahead and assign this paragraph an ID. So I'm going to say ID equals Halloween. I can call it anything, but I'm going to go ahead and call it Halloween because I want it to be Halloween themed. So I want any changes I make to the CSS to apply to this paragraph, but not this one. And I can do that by going back into style.css and then going down here and saying hashtag Halloween. Is that right? Or am I misremembering? Yeah, okay, cool. So with this, it's going to find the ID that matches what I put here and then apply whatever I want. So I can say color black and background orange. More of an orange red is better, but whatever. Yeah. So now it's got more of that theming that I wanted. And in fact, if I wanted to have more of these, I could just make a different ID for every one, but that would be really annoying. So it's usually better when dealing purely with CSS changes to use a class. So if I want to say another paragraph here, say, so is this one? And I want it to actually have these values applied. Again, I could give it another ID, Halloween 2, and then make CSS for Halloween 2, but I'd rather just have them both be part of the same class so I don't have to redo that CSS for both of them. So I can say class equals Halloween for both. And when I run it, nothing happens because I need to change up the syntax here. This is still looking for something with an ID of Halloween. So if I want to look for the class Halloween, I can say .Halloween instead of the hashtag. So now it applies it to both of those and anything that is the Halloween class. It doesn't even just have to be paragraphs. I could apply it to my title as well, my heading, or really anything that has a background property or a color property, or one that has only one of those. It'll just ignore anything that doesn't apply. Like if I apply it to the image, for example, there wouldn't be any errors. It just wouldn't do anything. In fact, I'll go ahead and show that right now. Because it doesn't really make sense to have a background or a color. Neither of those actually apply to the image. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into our little mini project for the workshop in order to talk about the JavaScript. So JavaScript is how you actually make the site do things. Right now, there's a static site that can't do anything. I mean, I guess the one thing is clicking links, but that doesn't really count. It's just kind of sitting there. And JavaScript is how things actually happen on websites. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and make a new REPL. Y'all can use the same one if you want, but I'm going to make a new one. Create REPL. So do I have? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make an HTML, CSS, JS REPL. I'm going to go ahead and make a clicker game. So that's what I'm going to call it. And go ahead and create REPL. So this is, if any of y'all have ever seen Cookie Clicker, a lot of the students at the Coder School, as well as Jennifer, really like it. So I figured that would be a good thing to do for today. And it's also a great project to get kids excited because it's relatively basic, but it can really be expanded upon if you want to. And I think those are the best starter projects, ones that are easy to jump into, but you can keep building on top of if you'd like. So let's go ahead and start with the very basic thing. I just want to have an image on the page that I can click. So I'm going to go ahead and say image, and then I'm just going to use the same image as before. So I'm going to say src equals, and then do I still have it pasted? I do. Oh, I have the whole thing. Oh, because I moved it into the thing. Moved it into the link earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those. Get some well-formed HTML here. Cool. And then I'm also going to go ahead and make this a little bigger since this is kind of the main focus. That's too big. 300. All right. So I'm going to make it so that when I click on this cat, I get more cats. That's the goal. And I also, want to have some upgrades and, things like that. But to start, whenever I click on this, I want my number of cats that I have to go up. So first, I'm going to need some way to display it. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little paragraph down below. And I'm going to say the number of kitties that I have is 0. Very sad. And it displays it down here, but nothing happens when I click. And that's where the JavaScript comes in. So I'm going to go into the JavaScript, and I'm going to go ahead and write a function. So in JavaScript, to make a function, you just say function and then give it a name. I'm going to call it onClick. You can call it whatever you want. But one thing you actually can't call it is click, because that is a built-in function in HTML. And I really struggled with that at one point because I did call it that and spent forever trying to figure out what the problem was. So besides that, you can call it whatever you want. It follows the same rules as pretty much every other coding language where, don't start with a special symbol, don't have spaces in it. And the convention in JavaScript is to use camel case. So first letter lowercase, every other start of a word is uppercase. And that's just the convention. So I want to have a variable that I can change over and over again as I click. So I'm actually going to go to before the onClick function, which I don't actually have to do it before. I can do it whenever I want, because all that matters is that my variable is defined before the function is actually called. But I like to do it before. So I'm going to say let kitties equal 0 in the beginning. So this is how you create a new variable in JavaScript. You can say let or var. I'm not going to get into the differences between those right now. It has to do with the scope. You are welcome to look it up if you feel like it. But I believe most people would say when in doubt, use let. That's what I say, at least. So you could, but yeah, if for our purposes, you could also say var kitties equals 0. So if you see that, don't freak out. It's the exact same thing for most purposes. So I'm going to say let kitties equal 0. And I want to go ahead and every time this is clicked, I want to change kitties by 1. So I can just go ahead and say kitties plus plus. And that's how you change things by 1 in JavaScript. You can also say kitties plus equals 1. And I guess I should be using spaces here. And that works in Python. And then the verbose way would be to say kitties equals kitties plus 1. And that's really what's happening underneath, although I would have to take out that plus here. It all works. It's all the same thing. But the shortest way, so the way you'll probably see most often when people just want to change things by 1, is to do this kitties plus plus. And that's, great and all, but I need some way to actually update this. This paragraph here is in no way tied to this variable. So what I need to do is make sure this function also updates this paragraph. But again, I don't actually have a way to get to this paragraph. So this is where IDs come in handy. Like I said, for CSS stuff specifically, you can use IDs, but generally it's better to use classes, just so that you don't have to redo work in the future. But here, I'm going to go ahead and give it an ID because I want to get specifically this paragraph for my JavaScript. So that comes in handy quite a bit. So ID equals, I'm just going to call this the display or kitty display. And the ID doesn't really follow many rules. I could actually put a space in here, I believe, and it would work because it is just strings getting passed back and forth, but that just feels icky to me, so I'm going to keep it together. So I'm going to go back into my script.js, and I need to actually get this object. So I'm going to let kitties equal 0, and then right after that, or right before, it doesn't make any difference, I'm going to let kitty display equal document.getElementById. What did I call it? Kitty display? Yes, I did. Oh no, not like that. It was lowercase here. And let me just make sure I got the right ID. Yes. All right, and I'll leave that up here for a little bit. So, oh, by the way, with the semicolons, JavaScript doesn't really care whether you do semicolons or not. I use semicolons. Some people don't. I haven't actually looked into why you should do one or the other. I think in the past, semicolons could mess it up if you didn't have them, which is why I do them. But I think it's smart enough now to not care. But I'm going to keep using semicolons. Anyways, so kitty display will actually go and get this element. So this document here, basically JavaScript and HTML as a whole interact using the document object model, which means, it's big words, but it means exactly what it sounds like. The HTML document, JavaScript just treats it as one big object. So it has a bunch of elements inside of it that can be interacted with and changed. And so it gets this element and puts it into the kitty display variable, and I can change its attributes. I can change whatever I want about kitty display. So in this case, what I want to change is the inner HTML, the stuff that I have written right here. I don't want to say kitty0. I want to say kitties1 or, well, whatever the kitties are. So I'm going to go ahead and say kitty display dot inner HTML equals kitties and then plus kitties. So for those of y'all who have only coded in Python before, or really most languages, any strongly typed language, you're probably thinking I messed up here because kitties is a number and this is a string, but JavaScript does not care. JavaScript is loosely typed and it's famously lenient with that. So when I combine a string and a number, it's going to try its best to make it work. And in this case, it's going to convert that number into a string to work together. Whereas in Python, this would crash because you can't combine a string and an int. Anyways, so I have this function here, but I run it and nothing happens because even though I call it on click, JavaScript doesn't just magically know. That's just a name. So I need to actually go back and connect it to the image. So that's another attribute inside the image that I can mess with. And the order of these attributes doesn't matter. I have source and width, then I'm adding the on click. None of that matters. I could put it in any order. And then in quotes, I'm going to say on click and then parentheses. Oops, I actually wanted it with a capital C because this is the name of my function. And yeah, so I'm going to expand this out so we can see it a little better. But I say on click with a lowercase c because this is the Java or the HTML attribute, and then equals the name of my function, which could have been called anything, but I call it on click because that's what it is. So now we got that. I'm going to go ahead and hit run, and let's see if this actually works. And it does. Every time I click, the kitties variable goes up, and then it gets put into that paragraph. So does anyone have any questions about this or need me to focus on either this page or the script so you can catch up? No, everything all good? Is it working for everyone? Cool. Yeah, and then side note, the reason why it's able to read this script is because of this script tag right here. If I took this out, it wouldn't actually see this JavaScript at all and nothing happens. Because it gives me a little error here that onClick is not a function because it was never defined. And I can have multiple script tags. It doesn't have, there's nothing special about these names, script.js or style.css. That also is only seen because it's up in here. Although I don't have anything in there yet. So there's nothing special about these names. You can have multiple scripts, you can have multiple style sheets, you can combine all the files all you want just through these tags. All right, so that's cool and all, but I want to be able to upgrade my kitties per click. So I want to have another image, another sort of button for us to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here right after the paragraph, and I'm going to add in another image. And I need a new image for that. So I'm going to go to cat. I like this one, and I'm going to go ahead and right click here and copy image link. So if I go back here and paste that in, okay. So yeah, this happens sometimes. This will actually work. What I have here with this crazy long string, it actually copied an encoding of the data through these characters rather than a link to the image, and it can deal with that. Our HTML page is totally fine with that, but I'm not really because it's annoying to scroll up and down. So if I want to get the actual link to it, so if this ever happens with a student, then usually I ask them to change it up and explain to them what happened. But I'm going to go ahead and actually, oops, where is this? Here we go. Go to the page itself. There's no open image for some reason. Okay, yeah, and then I actually need to go to here. Still need to, yeah, there we go. This is the actual image link. Whoops, I just pasted it away. Cool. So undo this and then paste that in there. Much better. And if I run it, it's also much bigger now. So I need to make sure I add a width to this as well. Oh, and I'm also missing my end caret here, which again, it still worked without it, but that was going to cause me problems later on if I added more tags further down. So I'm going to go ahead and say width equals, this one I am going to make much smaller. I'm going to say 50 in quotes. And now I have a little upgrade down here, but nothing actually happens when I click it. So let's go back to script.js and add some things that I can mess with. So I don't want kitties to just go up by 1 every time. I want it to be something that's upgradable. I want it to be a variable. So I'm going to go ahead and also here add let kitties per click, so KPC equal 1 as a default. And so down here, I want to make a function that I can connect to this image that will change cookies or kitties per click. So I can go here and just say function upgrade. Yeah, that's fine. No, since I know what's going to happen in the future, and that'll get confusing, I'm going to say upgrade KPC. And then I'm going to go ahead and just change KPC by 1. Yeah, and side note, it is like totally okay for me to mess with these variables. JavaScript is cool with that. Again, if you're used to just Python, you would need to declare it as global, but that's not the case in JavaScript. As long as, yeah, you can mess with variables that are outside the scope of the function. That's totally fine. Cool. So this changes KPC by 1, and then I can also go back here so that this actually matters. I can, instead of changing kitties by 1 every time, I can say plus equals KPC and run that. So now, if I do this, it just goes up by 1. If I click on this, nothing happens still. It still goes up by 1 because I never actually connected this function to the on-click attribute of this image. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a attribute here and say on-click equals, and go ahead and put in what I named the function there, which is upgrade KPC. And end quote. So now if I run it, my kitties per second, my kitties go up by 1 per click, and then I clicked on that twice. So now, yeah, every time I click, it goes up by 3. So that's working, but we probably do want a little bit more of a visible indicator to the player, what their kitties per click are. So we can just do the same sort of thing with the kitties per click that we did with the kitties. And we also want this to cost something. So let's go ahead and handle both of those values so that we don't just get to upgrade endlessly for free. So I'm going to go back into script.js. And first things first, I'm going to make it so that it costs some amount of kitties to upgrade my kitties per click. So I'm going to add an if statement into here. I'm just going to say if, and then in JavaScript, you need parentheses around your condition for your if statement. So I'm going to say if kitties is greater than or equal to, I'm going to go ahead and add a cost into here. I'm going to say up here, just, so I'm not hard coding this number. I'm going to let cost equal 20. I'll do 10 so I don't have to click as much for it. So if kitties is greater than or equal to the cost, then I add curly brackets so I can move this into the curly brackets, since that is also how JavaScript tells what is or isn't inside an if statement or a function or a loop. And JavaScript also does not care about indentation. I could, if I wanted, even put all these together on one squish line, and that would be an awful idea. You should still, treat it like it's Python or, whatever language that does care about indentation, because that just makes it way easier to read. But JavaScript doesn't actually care. I can have it be all weird like this, and it still totally works. It only cares about the curly brackets. So I can change the kitties per click, and I also need to remove the cost from kitties. So I'm just going to say kitties minus equals cost before I do that. And then, I don't have an else or anything because if I click on it and I don't have the kitties for it, then nothing happens. So my kitties go up by 1. I click on this, they should still go up by 1. Yep. And now I can get up to, get up to 10. And then if I try this out, oh yes, my kitties went down, but I didn't actually update the display. So if I click on this now, you can see now I have 2 kitties. Because my kitties per click went up to 2. But I hadn't updated my kitties display, so it still said 10, even though they were actually at 0. Does that make sense? So then once I did update it, then it gets the kitty display.inner.html and sets it to what it actually is, which is 2, and then so on and so forth. So if I do that again, my kitties are actually gone, but it doesn't see that yet. But when I click on this, I right now actually have 0 kitties, but if I click on this, it gives me 3. Cool. So yeah, so let's go ahead and fix that. First of all, we want the kitties difference to actually display. So I can say kitty display equals document.getElementById. Oops, sorry, no, I don't need to do that. I don't need to actually get the kitty display because I already did it up here. That was part of my point of doing this. I could do this in every single function that uses kitty display, but it's just easier to put it up there once and use that over and over again. So kitty display.innerHTML equals kitties colon space and then yeah plus kitties. I could have just copied and pasted it from up above too. But yeah, so now it actually should properly update the kitties when I buy it, and then yeah, now I see these changes right away. Any questions about this? All right, cool. So there's a couple more things I want to add. Something in the actual cookie clicker game is it's not just about clicking. There's also cookies that you generate passively. There's cookies that you acquire over the course of some amount of seconds. So that's something I want to add in. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked. One last thing is I do want to still have my kitty per click counter. So let's go ahead and add that in first real fast. So I can go back to index.html, go right underneath the paragraph, say p id, whoops, id equals, I'll call this kpc display. And then just say kitties per click 1 to start. And now I can go back into my script.js, do the exact same thing here, right? So I'll go ahead and put this right under here. Let kpc display equal document.getElementById, quotes and parentheses and quotes, kpc display. And then down here, I just need to make sure I actually properly update it. I can say kpc display equals document dot, oh my gosh, same thing again. I don't need to do that again. Inner HTML equals is per click, and a colon and a space, and then plus kpc. All right, so now I see my kitties per click here. I can bounce this up, and then when I click on this, now I can see that, okay, my kitties per click have actually gone up. All right, so now let's go ahead and add in that next step, which is the kitties per second. And so the first part is going to be a lot of repeat, but it shouldn't take us that long. So I'm going to say let kitties per second equal 0 to start. I guess I'll start out at 1 just so we can see it in action right away. And I'll also, since we know we're going to use it later, have the kitties per second display equal document.getElementById. It doesn't exist yet, so I'll need to make sure I put it in. But I'm just going to call it KPS display, lowercase, be consistent with what I've been doing, and then go back to index.html and just go ahead and add in another paragraph with the default value of kitties per second. And I'm going to leave this at 0. It'll be, actually, I'll do it at 1 so it doesn't get confusing. Yeah, so I run this, nothing happens because we're not actually applying the kitties per second. So this is where things might get a little confusing because what you'd want to do here, or what I would want to do if I was seeing this for the first time, is make a loop. I'd want to say like, all right, I want to have like a while true, just runs while the entire site is running, like wait a second, add the kitties, wait another second, add the kitties, right? The problem is JavaScript doesn't have a wait function. And JavaScript is, generally it's single threaded. So if I have a loop that's running the entire time the page is loading, nothing else gets to run. So the page just, freezes and crashes and, your browser says, Firefox or Chrome is, this page is not responding, close it. So we can't use a loop to do that. What we can use is something called an interval. So down here at the bottom, it doesn't really matter where I put it as long as it's after I define my function. I'm going to say set interval. And then in parentheses, I haven't actually defined the function that I'm going to use here. So I'm going to put this right inside. Basically, what set interval does is it takes 2 arguments. It takes a function, so it's like what should it do, and it takes a wait time. How often should it do it? So I want the function to be add the kitties to my kitty value, and I want the wait time to be 1 second. So first I'm going to give it the function. I can just define that right inside. I can use an anonymous function here, which is like lambda function in Python. But all it is, if you don't know that, then it's just a function without a name. Instead of creating a function outside, which I totally could do, I could create a function just like these and then put that function into here. But instead, I'm just going to say function and then not give it a name. And I'm just going to define it right in here. I'm going to put these curly brackets in and press enter. And this is totally valid syntax. This is totally fine to put it into set interval directly like this. So I'm going to set interval, and then the function is just changing kitties by the kitties per second, right? And then I also need to make sure I update the kitty display. Otherwise, it's just kind of changing silently. And then the next argument is the number of milliseconds it should wait between each time. So I want to wait 1,000 milliseconds. And I guess technically I would put a semicolon there. So does anyone have any questions about this set interval or anonymous functions? No? Cool. Yeah. So now if I run this, it's going to run this function that I put in here, which just, does this code every second, every 1,000 milliseconds. And you can see that every second my kitties are going up. And it still works with my kitties per click because they're still using the same variable. They don't get in each other's way in any way. So now I can, still update my kitties per click, and so on and so forth. I do want to add a way to upgrade the kitties per second too. So for now, since we're, running short on time, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of do some copying here. So I want to have another image for upgrading the kitties per second. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing, paste it right under. I'm going to change the source so it doesn't get confusing. That's another good cat picture I can use. Oh, okay, perfect. Let's do this one because it's square. All right. And then now I can go ahead and put this in for the source. And let's see. Yeah, and it shows up here. But it's still, this is still just a regular, this still uses upgrade KPC. So instead, we're going to have to use another function. I'm just going to change it right now, even though we need to define it first before it's actually going to do anything. And then go into script.js. And this is going to be the exact same thing, right? I'm going to copy this. paste it in, change it to KPS. And then I have here, like, so kitties minus equals cost, I'll change the kitties. So instead I'm going to change the KPS. And instead of doing the KPC display, I'm going to go ahead and do the KPS display. All right. And then am I missing anything? I do want to have them be different costs, but I'll do that a little later. Yeah, I think that's everything. I'm going to go ahead and change my kitties per second to start out. Whatever, I can start at 1. That's fine. All right. Cool. So get up to 10, and then now, okay, it does have an issue. KPS display is null because my paragraph here, is also called KPC display. Oh, so this is actually an interesting thing. This is a mistake. You should never have this. You should never have. Oh, what's up, Stephen? Were you raising your hand? Or
yeah. Up? So in the JavaScript file, do we have to change KPC that we're like adding to the string to KPS?
Oh, yes.
1? Okay.
Yeah. So we do want to change this this string as well. So this would be kitties per second. Good point. Okay. Yeah, but right now I'm getting an error that's actually caused by something different, which was a mistake that I made, but it's a good thing to point out. Right now, I have this has KPC display and this has KPC display. You should never have two things that have the same ID. But again, HTML just it doesn't give errors. It just kind of just lets things happen. So this one still correctly changes KPC display. So let's see what it does. If I click on it, it actually is going to do the first one. So it doesn't work quite like you would like variables work. It's not like the second one that does it. It's once an ID is set, it's locked out. Anything else that tries to get that ID doesn't get to have it. But that's kind of just a little fun fact that you really don't need to know at all, because you should never do that. Always just one ID for one element on the page. So this should be KPS display, which is what this code is looking for here. So I go ahead and hit run. And then now, if I get the kitties, I can click on this. And yeah, now my kitties per second go up, although I didn't actually see this change. So what am I doing wrong here? In script.js, create KPS. KPS display. Oh, plus KPC. This should be.
That was what I was.
Oh, that's what you meant. Sorry, I thought you meant it. Yep. Thank you. This is the danger of trying to copy and paste code, especially when you're trying to multitask and talk. Good eye, Stephen. Thanks for catching that. And then sorry that I didn't understand your point. Cool. But you can see by my kitties going up that it was still working. It was just the display that didn't change. Cool. And then I guess the last thing I want to do, I'll send out a version of this with slightly more features that none of which are really too important, just to polish it up a little bit. I kind of think we hit the important concepts for this. I want these to be more of like a sidebar over on the side rather than down at the bottom where I have to scroll down. I mean, in the real site, obviously they're just down here, but I kind of like the layout more of having them on the side. So what I'm going to do is I want to group them together. So I'm going to put them both into a div. So I'm going to put a div tag here. And then at the end of this one, I'm going to say /div. So all a div does is group things together. That's it. It does make things it is a block element, which means that everything is going to be above or below it. It's not going to be in line like, say, these two images are with each other. But it groups them together, and that's all it does. That's all a div does. So the point of that is I can mess with it either with JavaScript or CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a class. And I'm going to say class equals right, because I'm going to put it on the right. So now I can go into script.js, style.css, and say dot right to say I'm going to change the right class. So what do I want to apply to the right class? Well, I want it to be on the right side, but before I can even do that, I have to change its position property. So again, this is just things that you can Google, but I change the position to absolute so the default for pretty much every element, I think every element actually, but maybe I'm missing something, is relative, position relative. And that's just what you see here, right? They kind of go to the left-hand side. They go above or below other elements if their elements like paragraphs are block elements. So there's always there's always going to be something above it and below it. Whereas images are inline elements, so they can be to the side if they want. But absolute just says it's going wherever it wants to go. It's not gonna regard other elements. So I'm gonna say top, well, that's gonna be 0. And then right, well, that's also gonna be 0. So that's how far from the top and the right they're gonna go. So now you can see that my div is up here in a little sidebar thing. But I do want these to be kind of going down the side rather than left and right. And like I said, these are inline elements, right? So they automatically go next to each other. You can put them into paragraphs and all that. But if I want them to work like these do, you'll notice that I put these right next to each other in the HTML, but they still go to the next line, and that's because they're block elements. So I'm going to say just images in this page are going to be display block. And now they go on top of each other, but they're still forced to go to the top right. And you know what? I don't like how close they are together. So I'm going to say margin 5px, 5 pixels. And now they're a little bit separated from each other. Cool. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Any requests for last minute additions, or like, how would I do this thing?
Right. I just wanted to double check. You're going to send the link to this Replit so we can look over it?
I will send this one right now in the chat, okay, so that the as is everyone gets. JD, thank you for the comment. Yeah, I saw you dying in the camera. But yeah, this is the one that we did here. I'll leave this one intact, so it's just exactly what we did, and you can review it and look over it and all that. I'm going to send one that's has just everything that I had in it, just kind of as backups, because I didn't expect to, get past this. This is actually exactly what I was planning, so I'm glad we managed to hit everything. But I do have one that has a slightly bit more polish, slight bit more things, and I'll go ahead and let's see, do I have that? I can, I'll just send that in the Discord. All right, cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending your Friday night here. It's really appreciated. And yeah, I hope I will see a lot of y'all at the full stack workshop on Sunday. But if not, then still, yeah, thank you for coming. Hope this is helpful.
Thank you, Nick.
See ya.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.